Okay. Very good. Okay, so good morning to one and all. Obviously, Simeon's not going to be with us this morning because he's, very unfortunate and sad. I actually knew Didi quite well from Ramaz. Very sad. So, anyways, we'll do our little our learning this morning. We'll dedicate it to Didi's memory, and we're thinking about Simeon and the whole family. Okay, so we are up to Reish Mem Vav in Orach Chaim. We finished the previous siman, dealt with business partnerships between a Jew and a non-Jew, and now the topic doesn't really shift that much, but it turns to a slightly different area, which is what happens with regards to borrowing and renting out and lending out to a non-Jew your kalim, your vessels. Can they use your equipment on Shabbos? They're doing what they do. Can I lend it out? Can I rent it out? Maybe there's a difference between those two situations. And this whole discussion, particularly at the beginning of this discussion, is going to turn on how to read one passage in the Gemara. So literally, it's all going to turn on how you read it. The Rambam and the Rif are going to read it in a particular way, and some of the others, Rabbeinu Yonah, maybe at the top of the list, read it in another way. And this is going to lead to two opinions that you'll see cited in the Shulchan Aruch. And the Rama is actually going to side with one of them because some of the Gedolei Ashkenaz sided with that opinion you'll see in a moment, it'll be Rabbeinu Yonah. So that's the roadmap at the beginning here. But understand that we'll read the Shulchan Aruch at the beginning, and then the Mishnah Berurah does a very nice job here of backing it up and explaining where this comes from, what's the passage in the Gemara, what are the two ways you could read this sugya, and how we got to the bottom line. So this is actually a very nice piece to sort of see the progression of things from the Gemara through the Rishonim and to the final halacha. So we are on page, I guess in my edition it says 16. I don't know if it says that.
Yeah, this is 16 in the upper right.
Okay, yeah, 16 in the upper right-hand corner. Reish Mem Vav. Right at the beginning, Dine Hasha'ala v'Haskara La'eno Yehudi b'Shabbos. Okay, so here we are. Let's read the Shulchan Aruch. Mutur lahashil ulahaskir kelav la'eno Yehudi v'afal pishu ose bahem melacha b'Shabbos v'pnei she'ein anu mitzuvim al shvisas kelim. It is permissible to lend out, right, to allow them to borrow, the non-Jew to borrow, or to rent the Jewish person's kalim, vessels. Even though the non-Jew will do malacha with the vessels that are owned by a Jew, they're going to do malacha with them on Shabbos. Even though they're going to do that, it's not a problem. It's mutter because we are not commanded, us as Jews are not commanded al shvisas kalim. Our kalim don't have to observe Shabbos. Now you're going to say that's the most ridiculous concept to even have considered shvisas kalim. Here you go, Michael. Why would this even be a havamina? Why would we ever think such a thing? So it's actually machlokas in the Mishnah it's between two Tanoim. I don't know I think it's in the Mishnah. I could get a price. I don't know offhand, but Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai have a machlokas. We paskin like Beis Hillel that there is no issue of shvisas kalim. Our kalim don't have to observe Shabbos. Beis Shammai actually thinks that our kalim have to observe Shabbos. Now this is not a completely crazy concept because if you look in the Torah, it does say that our animals have to observe Shabbos. Say, what does an animal have to do anything? But that's the idea. It's explicitly in the Torah that your animal has to keep Shabbos. Now, if your animal goes off and watches TV on their own or starts using their cell phone, I don't think you have to stop them. But you can't have your animal do a malacha on your behalf. So you can't take the the horse or out of the stable, and it's carrying something on its back, or you load some animal up with something, and now they start carrying in the Rishus Harabim, right? So they would, let's say you have a donkey and you want to walk from one part of the city to the other part. I'll load up the donkey with Shabbos lunch, and we're going over to the other family. But there's no eruv and there's no whatever, so you can't do that. Your animal can't serve as a means of doing malacha. By the way, this also means you can't hold your dog or tell your dog or hold your dog up to the light switch and say and basically encouraging your dog to flip the light on and off. Your dog has to keep Shabbos. By the way, same thing with children. That's a misconception. I have people, I'll have my child do it. It's actually worse. It's better if you do it and do some sort of shinui to switch it. But anyway, so Shrisas Kalim, it's not a crazy concept that things that belong to us like an animal have to keep Shabbos. So at least it's a machlokas. We paskin like Beis Hillel. So if your Kalim start using their cell phone, let them. I don't care. But it's a machlokas.
And Beis Shammai does it based on the animals?
I think that's where it comes from. Yeah, that Shabbos extends not just to you and to your animal, but as well, just like the animal, you have kalim as well that have to. Your kalim can't do things on Shabbos. Usher, by the way, set it to change Shabbos a lot, because we do that all the time, right? We set our kalim up to sometimes go on Shabbos. Right. So it'll be very complicated to allow such a thing.
The farmer has to have his animal rest.
Yeah, the Torah is explicit about the animals. Yeah, that's for sure. But the Torah is definitely not explicit about kalim. Anyways, so that's the first opinion here. V'yesh omrim that further what if I let my non-Jewish friend, he rents out my kalim? No problem, not a big deal at all. V'yesh omrim, the other opinion is the kalim she'osim b'hem malacha, any type of kli that could be used to do a malacha. Gives an example now. Kagon macharesha, a plow. So I lend, it's Erev Shabbos, Friday afternoon. My non-Jewish neighbor comes over. Can I borrow your plow? Or can I rent your? So let me be, let's be very specific here. Let's talk about a renting, because we'll talk about borrowing in a second. He wants to rent my plow over Shabbos. Here, I'll give you $20. Can I, use your plow? The Hilchot Shabbat, or anything similar where it does, but there's malacha involved. So Asur lahaskir le'eno Yehudi be'erev Shabbos. It is prohibited to rent it out to them on erev Shabbos, on Friday, dafka on Friday. We'll talk about why Friday it's a problem and not the other days of the week, as you see here right now. Uvayom hachamishi muter lahaskirlo. On Thursday, it is permissible. Friday, Thursday, yes. According to the second opinion, which is Rabbeinu Yonah is attributed with this opinion, though others do agree with him. Uvilvad, condition though, shelo yitol schar Shabbos ela b'havla. And this everybody will agree to, not just the second opinion, but the first opinion too. If you just rent out your kli, your kli for Shabbos day, that's it. They come to you and they say, can I borrow your plow from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Shabbos, on Saturday? And you say yes, and that'll cost you $20. Well, that's called schar Shabbos. It's a separate problem, right? We've talked about it many times. If you get paid for something that's singularly related to Shabbos, it's not good. It's a d'Rabbanan. So again, here you have to have the concept of havla has to be part of a larger a set of days, or in this case, he gives an example. Kagon sheyaskilo lechodesh. She wants to borrow your plow for a month, to rent out your plow for a month, or l'shavua, or at least for a week. It can't just be Shabbos. It could be, by the way, for 2 days. It could be for Friday and Saturday. That's the havla. Though it's probably not the normal agreement. Usually, it's probably a month and week. Exactly. That's not my business. As long as I'm getting paid for a week, I'm not getting paid for Shabbos. I'm getting paid for a week. That's the way that the Chacham made the Isser. They made this prohibition of Schar Shabbos, and so they can define a little bit the parameters. And so as long as I'm not getting paid for Shabbos, right? The moment you start to specify out Shabbos, again, you can have a weekly rental, a rental for a week. But if every day the person comes over and gives me the $20 at the beginning of the day, then the Shabbos payment is prohibited because it's clearly, it's earmarked Shabbos money.
So, just what I was thinking about. So, if it's a Monday,
No problem.
I can give you the $20 per day, and say, okay, here's the money.
If you make it a deal, let's say for 1 week, and it's $20 a day. So if I give you $140 at the beginning of the rental, so it's not a problem.
And then
Yeah,
you don't see the guy anymore until.
Yeah, you'll bring it back next Sunday. Exactly. Okay. The last thing the Shulchan Aruch writes here is ulahashil. Now here it comes to this where I separated borrowing and renting. To the non-Jew to borrow it from you, mutter. That's okay. Afilu b'erev Shabbos, even if it's right before Shabbos. That's okay. Borrowing is different than renting, and we'll talk. Vishnabur will try to give an explanation as to why that's the case. It relates a little bit to the idea here. This gets a little bit into a Marisayan concern and question. That's where it's going to come down to when you borrow versus renting. Though I admit here, I'm going to be very honest with that. I'm not so sure that the person who passes by is going to know if you're borrowing or you're renting. So that's my one question I have here. But there is a chiluk that is made here by the Rishonim. It's not in the Gemara. Rishonim make this distinction between borrowing and renting. So we'll talk about a little bit more when we get there in just a moment.
So somebody can actually come over to me a minute before Shabbos and say,
and they want to borrow.
Can I have the keys to your car? I'm going to use it.
Can I borrow your car on Shabbos? Yes. So yeah, non-Jew could borrow your car on Shabbos.
Supposedly that's permissible.
Supposedly that's permissible. Yes. Yes. Yeah. According to this, yeah, we have to think about it a little bit more. But
there's a difference because if you're borrowing it, that has nothing to do with money.
Good. So that's a little bit where this. Yeah.
Right, but the car is obviously going to be used on Shabbos only.
Yes,
so.
I'm saying, but opposed to what we're talking about, borrowing against the other one is a whole different.
Right. So again, this is going to come to the issue of your Caleb doing malacha on Shabbos. And we'll talk about it a little bit more in just a moment.
I guess there's a difference between a car and a
donkey. It looks a little, yeah.
That's the difference.
Yes.
Yeah, really, if your license plate says
right
something.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Yeah.
If you have a sign in your car, we want Mashiach now.
Correct. You wouldn't have in a car. You may not see the driver. You might see the bumper sticker. Whereas with a donkey, right? With a donkey, you see who's riding the donkey. Right? You may not notice the bumper sticker on the donkey. So, anyways, so we'll talk about it more in a second. So the Ramah then adds in here, he wants to paskin like the second opinion of the Yesh Omer with regards to the question about can certain things happen on Shabbos? Can you rent out the vessels on Shabbos? And the answer is, if it's used for malacha, the answer is no. So to your point here, and according to this opinion, if you're renting out the car, you can't do it. It's your car, and it's not because your kalim can't do work on Shabbos, malacha on Shabbos. It's going to be for another reason we'll see in a second. But the borrowing, that may be l'kulei alma. I mean, everybody agrees that borrowing, letting someone borrow the car, is okay. It's interesting. Again, the Marisayan concern wasn't there back in the day, with such a question. Anyways, it is permissible to rent it out on Erev Shabbat. Sorry, to allow to lend it out. They'll borrow your non-Jewish friend will borrow it on Erev Shabbos. Even though you do make a stipulation, you say, when I need that one day, you look at his, you're going to let me borrow that, so you'll borrow my car, or what else? Maybe I'll use car. You'll borrow my my tools, and I'll borrow that on Wednesday this coming week. So you make a kind of an agreement, a deal, but it's all the terminology here is borrowing, right? So if on a legal level, it's all borrowing. So he says here, "V'lo amrina b'kai gava dahave k'schirus." That's okay. We don't say that. That's like a schirus, like a transaction, a money transaction. Essentially, you'll rent my tools, and the payment will be that I have access on Wednesday to your whatever. So that's okay, because technically, if you look at it step by step, this act is an act of borrowing. Technically, if the Wednesday thing doesn't happen, can he take me to court? No. Right? So this is an act of borrowing, and that's an act of borrowing. They're really, I guess, fundamentally two distinct moments in time, two distinct actions. So even though, wink, wink, nod, nod, we all understand that they're kind of tied. But on a legal level, again, I don't think you could take the guy to Beis Din, if on Wednesday he didn't give me he didn't let me borrow. That's you think you could take him to Beis Din? Why? Can you spell it out?
I lent that to you contingent on.
Lent it. You just said lent
I
it.
lent it to you contingent on.
Not rent it. Lent it.
Right, but can you lending is by allowing someone to borrow something by its very definition means that I don't owe you anything, right? So I would think that that's a distinct and unique act. And then, because of social reasons, maybe, or you want to be able to keep the relationship so that we can continue to have I don't want to say quid pro quo, but we want to, that may be, I leave it to the legal scholars here to define is it two these unrelated actions. Certainly by halachically, it seems that the Rishonim are of that opinion.
I got a fast question.
Yes, Michael, go ahead.
All right, so the young lawyer over there wants to borrow my car.
Yes.
But then I have no problem. Then I get later on the day, I get a call. There's an emergency. We have to figure out how to finish the car.
It's okay. Now, if you did, that's a question about. It's not really a Hilchot Shabbat question. That's now I had an agreement, and now I have to renege on the agreement.
Can I drive the lady?
Depends a little bit on the arrangement you made. A lot of these things that if you made an arrangement and then and it was that definition of it was X, then you have to follow whatever the legal agreement says. Though obviously people can be nice and in an emergency situation. Okay, let's go to the Mishnah Berurah now. Let's read Aleph. Okay, here he really gives the whole background. A lot of this will start to make a little more sense. He says at the beginning here, Mishnah Berurah Aleph, Hu das Harifa Rambam, as I previewed to you. The first opinion is the opinion of the Rif and the Rambam, the two great Sephardic poskim. Usavira lahu dehadatanya, and they were explaining the Gemara in the following. So here comes the Gemara, which everything is based on. Okay, it's a brisa, which says the following: Lo yaskir kelav le'eno Yehudi be'erev Shabbos u'revi v'chamishi muter. That's all it says. The brisa says, which again, the Gemara then they have to start dealing with this. So the Amoraim have to start dealing with, well, how do we break this down? The tradition was the teaching was you couldn't rent out to a non-Jew on Erev Shabbos your kalim, but on Wednesday and Thursday it's mutter. That's what it says. So the Rif and the Rambam explain the following: why is this? Why does the Brisa say it's usher? Umitam shvisas kalim to usher, because the Brisa is holding that shvisas kalim, that your vessels, are not allowed to work on Shabbos. And this Brisa follows the traditions of Beis Shammai. The Svirlahu, they hold. The vessels of a person have to rest on Shabbos like the animal has to rest on Shabbos. That's Beis Shammai's opinion, that there's no differentiation. Aval Beis Hillel Svirlahu Shvisas Kalim Ein Adam Mitzvah. Beis Hillel holds your kalim don't have to rest on Shabbos. Your kalim can be engaged in malacha on Shabbos. Obviously, you can't do the malacha, but your kalim can be involved in malacha. And therefore, it's fine to lend out, to rent out your kalim, even on Erev Shabbos. Vafilu kalim she'osim behem malacha. Even kalim which are used, which their only usage is malacha, right? How else can you use a plow? Plow is used for malacha. Because there are things that are switch hitters. You could use the kli in a way that's not a malacha on Shabbos, and you could also use it in a way that is a malacha. We're not even talking about a switch hitter here. We're talking about, lending out, renting out your kli that is only used for malacha, and that's why the Rambam and the Rif completely ignore this brisa, and they say it's mutter. There's nothing to talk about, even on Erev Shabbos, because that brisa, which this whole discussion is based off, is following Beis Shammai. We don't paskin like Beis Shammai. We paskin like Beis Hillel, and that's why it's mutter afilu be'erev Shabbos. Umikol makom gam heim sfirlo. Even the Rambam and the Rif though would say the chol hakelim ein heter lahaskir rak b'havla. You have to have the havla aspect. You can't. That's a separate issue though. You can't just rent it out from 9 to 5 on Saturday, because then you're getting paid for something that happened specifically on Shabbos and only on Shabbos. And that's doing business on Shabbos. Aval lo al Shabbos l'chora afilu al maskirim b'tchilas hashavua the zehave schar Shabbos, and that's even if you make the agreement on Sunday. You make the agreement on Sunday, you're going to rent out my kli from 9 to 5 on Saturday, but we're 6 days before that. Doesn't matter. That's still problematic because you're getting paid for something that's only going to happen on Shabbos. That's a Shabbos payment. But everyone agrees to that. I mean, that's really not related to this so much, even though he brought it in at the end, the Havlah, because he just wants to remind us. But that at its core, the Rif and the Rambam, which is the first opinion cited here in the Shulchan Aruch, there's no issues at all here. As it says later on, the second opinion that's cited, we talk about the Havlah issue. Nobody's lenient on the Havlah issue. There's no lenient, but that clear as daylight. That's on the books. You can't have business transactions that only involve Shabbos day. The Hayesh Omrim, the second opinion that was cited, who das harav Rabbeinu Yonah. That is the opinion of Rabbeinu Yonah. The Hach Brisa lo asar mishum shvisas kelim. He says no. You have to explain the Brisa differently. Whereas the Rif and the Rambam made it about shvisas kelim, and they said, this Brisa must be following Beis Shammai. Rabbeinu Yonah says that's not what's going on here. It's not shvisas kelim. That's not why there's a prohibition here. Ela kekule alma aseh. This opinion follows even Beis Hillel. Nobody argues that this is not a machlokas, this opinion. Everybody agrees to it. It's not about shvisas kelim. What's this about? He says, "V'atam the kishemoser be'erev Shabbos es hakelim." When you hand over the kelim on Friday to the non-Jew, and these are kelim that we she'osim melacha bahen. These are ones that you do prohibited labors with. And then what are they going to do? They're going to turn around Friday night, Shabbos morning. They're going to start using it right away to do these malachos. Nira. So this I said it's a little bit of a marasayim here. Nira. It appears. He's not actually a shaliach of the Jew. He has nothing to do with this. He rented it, from me. It's not a big deal. So he says, it gives the appearance of that this non-Jew is acting as a shaliach of the Jew in terms of the malacha that's happening. That's why it's prohibited. That is Rabbeinu Yonah's read on the Gemara. Very different than the Rif and the Rambam, and that's why his conclusion is different than the Rif and the Rambam. Anyway, so it appears that's usur. It's interesting though, because what's the isur? It's an isur d'Rabbanan. The idea of Amir al-Nachri is an isur d'Rabbanan. People are going to say he's violating an isur d'Rabbanan. You see here how, I don't want to say crazy, but how stringent we are. We've seen now, since we started Hilchot Shabbat with this topic of Amir al-Nachri, how stringent the rabbis are when it comes to violating Amir al-Nachri, that people should think that you violated Amir al-Nachri. Which is an Isser Rabbanan in the first place. Usually you think, we'll be stringent, when it comes to the appearance of an Isser D'Oraisa, even though maybe I'm not. So, but here it's even on Isser Rabbanan, we see a lot of stringency.
Even if he's using the plow in his own field?
Maybe because it's a good question, right? He's doing it in his own. So take a look. Actually, let's read two more lines. He addresses your question almost head on. He says, "V'afagav de b'simun reish nun beis," which we didn't get to. 6 simanim from now. Sif Bay is over there. Isa the shari litain oros la'abdanim chashechem. You're allowed to give a non-Jewish tanner, what's it? The leather, the hide, to do his business, to do the work and prepare the skin. And you're allowed to do that im chashechem, 5 minutes before Shabbos. Here, I need you to work to do it. I don't. What does a tanner even do, by the way? What are they?
They tan the hide.
They tan the hide. Okay, great. Dry it. It's a whole to do, right?
Chemicals involved.
Yeah, there's malacha involved for sure. Da'eno Yehudi adaited nafshei kavit. Okay, but the kotza so dumb. Come on, didn't I just give it to you? The reason it's mutter is because I told you. I didn't say do it on Shabbos. I told you, do your job and I'll pay you. Do it by Wednesday. So why is that okay? I can give it to him 5 seconds before Shabbos, and he's going to do malacha with. He's taking my thing and he's doing malacha on it. My kli. That the leather skin is my kli. You wouldn't think of it as a classic kli, but it's mine, and now he's doing malacha on it. How is that mutter? And our cases that we've been describing are prohibited. So shane hasam, there it's different. She'ein rebach la yisov b'masha eino Yehudi ose b'Shabbos. There's no profit that the non-Jew does it on Shabbos, because if he done it on Monday, I don't need it until Wednesday. If he does it Monday, it's also fine for me. That he chose to do it on Shabbos says I did nafshei. That's his own. That he wanted to clear his schedule. Whereas our case, Masha'en Kain, Kishimoselo B'Revi V'Chamishi. Sorry, I skipped. Excuse me. Sorry. About B'Schirus Kalim. When it comes to renting out the Kalim, Yadua who She'im Yasna Im Ha'ena Yehudi She'yishbos B'Hakalim B'Shabbos Lo Yitain Lo Schirus Kolkach. If I told the guy, "Hey, I'm going to give it to you, but you can't do this on Shabbos," because I am benefiting from the what's happening on Shabbos, right? That's what he's saying here. If I told the guy, "Don't do it on Shabbos," with the hide or with the tanner, if I told him, if I technically told him, I guess, "Don't do it on Shabbos," so he would still take the business from me. Then he would just do it after Shabbos. That he does it on Shabbos, that's his own business. But here, I'm renting the kalim out, and I tell him, "Don't use it on Saturday." Lo yite lo schiros chalkach. He won't even make a deal with me. He won't get involved in this whole thing. Hilchach kevan sheyesh revach la yisov masha akelim niskarim eitzel ha'eno Yehudi b'stama. Since there is profit to the Jew that comes to the Jew by renting out the kalim, in this kind of a way. Here, you want to rent my kli? Great. Not that I told you to do work on my kli, but here you want to rent it out. And they're going to do work with it on Shabbos. It appears, it gives the look of that he's like the shaliach of the Jew. I don't know. So it's a difficult. As I was reading this, I was like, it's hard. It's a hard, it's hard logic to kind of swallow here, because what you're saying is that because I end up profiting from what happened on Shabbos, meaning that the whole deal falls through if I don't allow him to do the work on Shabbos, so suddenly he becomes like my shaliach. But he's not really doing my work. But he's a shaliach in the sense that I'm really benefiting from what happened on Shabbos. Even though if he let it sit in the shed over Shabbos, I would have also gotten paid. So, anyways, it gives the slightest appearance of this. And apparently, he says here, "Masha'en kain kishemoser lo b'revi v'chamishi." Not so if you give it over to the non-Jew on Wednesday or Thursday. There, it's mutter the lo mischaze kulei hai kishlucho. There, it doesn't appear. If I give it to you 5 minutes before Shabbos, it gives a yuckier feeling to your, looks like you're doing something for me on Shabbos. That I gave it to you 5 minutes, or I gave it to you Friday. I gave it to you on Thursday or Wednesday, and that it was still in your possession. It was still in the non-Jew's possession on Saturday, and he was using it for malacha. I'm a little more. It looks less like a shaliach. Yes, that's correct.
You can't give him the flower to do 5 minutes.
Because he looks like he.
That looks like something.
Because
Even though it looks like people who see it didn't see what you did.
That I gave him the plow.
Yeah, I mean, unless the plow has a.
Yeah, it has the Steve Smith Plowing Corporation on it. Yeah,
Probably is a Smith plowing.
correct. By the way, correct. That's right. Yes, the idea here is with a lot of these things, we live in relatively large neighborhoods. Chazal didn't always function in such a way. They were in small towns, and so you had a Jew and a non-Jew, even all the Rishonim who are they're common. A Jewish community. We talk about in the Crusades. How many Jews were killed in the Crusades? 5,000, which is a quarter of Rhineland Jewry. It's like pales in comparison to thinking like 6 million. But we view the Crusades as and it's a terrible, tragic story. Quarter of the Jews in the Rhineland were just wiped out. But the number was so small. But the idea was that towns, the Jews, even the big Jewish cities, right? It was nowhere near anything we can imagine. So the idea that that a person may have recognized something, or particularly in smaller Jewish communities where there were 20 Jews in a town, 20 families, in a town, which is very common, by the way. They knew that they've uncovered mikvahs, throughout these small European cities, Italy and other places. And what was the situation? 10, 15 Jewish families to a town sometimes. So you would have business dealings with the non-Jew, and people would see, it was a smaller town. They talk, whatever. And so that, I think that I have trouble a little bit relating to this, because if I drive by a farm, is that his? Is that somebody else's? Who knows? Who even knows this non-Jew? But I think that they were in a smaller situation.
From a maritime point of view, what's the difference if you gave it on Friday or on Thursday or Wednesday? The person who sees it may not know that this was given the week, middle of the week.
Right. So I wonder if that's why I did use the term maritime. He doesn't use it, and the reason is I was too loose with the term. Mechse keshlucho probably relates more to this business deal smells funny. It makes it look like he's, from almost your own perspective as the one who's renting it out or lending it out, it almost looks like, that he's your shaliach. To you, I wonder, and maybe not as much as how it appears. Though I think it's all kind of a factor here, but it may be that it's mechse keshlucho, because it also is how it almost seems to you. And when you give it to him 5 minutes with the plow, 5 minutes before Shabbos, and you're benefiting from this, and it's a business deal that let's say it's for Saturday and Sunday, and he gives it back to me on Sunday night. The idea that it feels a little bit like I'm getting the money for it, and he's doing the work, and it's a little bit like my shaliach, but he's not actually doing shaliach. He's not doing anything for me. It's a
time, but it's your action.
Yeah, to be honest, the Rif and the Rambam are a more compelling read of the Brisa, because it's cleaner, right? It's just like that's Beis Shammai. That's why it was not allowed, and here he has to explain that no, there's another Issa D'Rabbanan that we didn't know about. Right.
Other halachos that we have that are based on the fact that animals have to work out. Can we learn from that fact something else?
Oh, learning from Shvisas Behemto.
I for one don't understand that, but I also understand it as being something separate. And nefesh isn't allowed for an animal.
Right. Correct.
So it's a separate category of things.
Shvisas Behemto is its own thing. Yeah. It doesn't fall under like the 39 malachos.
Now we're bringing it in as a basis for making other decisions, even though it's a.
Correct. I don't know if there are. It may be that this is the only place where it is extended to, and of course it's subject to machlokas. The Skilla says no, there's nothing to extend it to. The Torah says, lo sa'aseh malacha Where was it? It's in the Ten Commandments, right? You look at the wording, but it's in there. Your behema can't do it. The kli is not in there. That's the source of machlokas. Can we extend the principle that an animal is a kli, or is an animal an animal? Yeah, I don't think that Shvisas Behema gets extended beyond this. We will talk about Shvisas Behemto. It's a question, when let's say your animal, starts doing things on. Can you have an arrangement where you sell your animal, for a few days? You give up the ownership rights, whatever. So we'll talk about those kind of cases, but usually your animal can't do things. It's just important, to know when you're in a place with no Eruv, your dog can't do things for you either. If you want to fetch something or whatever, you can't tell the dog, fetch. You never thought you'd learn that here. Anyways, but
This last opinion is only for renting, not for lending, correct?
Correct.
Because you get no benefit from lending.
That's going to be why lending is going to be. You'll see here in a moment. If you want to just take a quick sneak peek at what Hinda was saying, you look at Dalit. He says, Dalit, and we'll come back to the other ones in Mishnah Berurah. The Kavan she'ein revach leYisrael b'melechas ha'einu. Here, there's no revach. There's no profits, right? Lo yomru shlucho hu lazeh. There's no shlichus that you could even start to imagine up, and therefore it's going to be mutter so long as and by the way, even if that's borrowing only on Shabbos. Right? What does it matter to me? It's not. I get $0.
So there's no Marasayan factor because the person walking by will have no idea.
Right. That's why I apologize that I use that word Marasayan. It's really that it looks like a shaliach from my perspective.
Right.
Yeah, it's not so much the other perspective. Yeah, but it's a funny concept because I'm going to trick myself.
No, it's not really. I mean, you've done something shady.
Right,
Yeah.
you're rationalizing that. Right. That's what it is. I can't use my plow on Saturday, so may as well make some money off of it.
Right.
I'll include it on Sunday, but and so it's the Mara sign is correct. Very good. So I appreciate you guys helping me shave that off. But that's the core of this machlokas and the sugya, and then we'll continue forward and try to understand the more details.